Hey, folks, welcome back to part two of Conversations with Heroes. That's featuring our Marine Sergeant Nestor Hernandez, Purple Heart recipient we've been talking to. I want to remind everybody this session's also, once again, brought to you by G2 Ranch in Pearsall, Texas. Don and Sandy Gilchrist, great people in this.
From the time that I got injured, they said when the second rocket hit, our second corpsman had pulled me into one of the rooms where we had our casualties. He said he pulled me in there and that I was laying there for, a minute or two, unconscious. And then all of a sudden he's like, you took a deep breath, you stood up, and then you ran back out. And later, I guess I ran back to the LZ, and at some point I collapsed. And that's when one of my other Marines had, actually, that was when I was carrying the dog back, because he had tripped over me, and he said that the dog had curled up next to me. And he said, if it wasn't for me tripping over you, you probably would have been left out there in the middle of this field. And so he loaded me up into the helicopter and the dog. And I think there was a total of 12 that got injured that night. And I remember waking up in the hospital, and there was not only Marines on one side, but there was like Afghan people on the other side. So I'm looking across the room, and there's like what in my mind looks like Taliban, and I'm thinking I got captured. Initially, I was in a daze. I was like,
crap.
Why is there what in my mind thought were Taliban in this room with me right now? And then once I kind of came to and realized where I was, my other Marines were in there. We were like in this like holding area before we got moved to another, more private area of the hospital. So initially it was nerve-wracking, because during my flight from when we got picked up from Kajaki to Leatherneck, they said I stopped breathing, and they had to intubate me. And so I remember when coming to, I remember like coughing up blood and my throat being really sore. And they had said because they had to intubate me because I had stopped breathing on the flight from Kajaki over to Leatherneck, which was roughly around like a 30-minute flight. And so...
Okay, you say stop breathing.
Yeah.
I mean, is that considered dead? What does that mean?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that was my initial question was, like what happened? And, later I find out, what all had happened. But initially it was because I remember for a while I was in the hospital recovering, because I was in the hospital for about a month. The main injury that was really was my head injury. Bright lights. I had to, before they gave me these sunglasses, I had to carry a rag over my head, and I would just barely have it where I could peek out and see. But otherwise, if I was looking at like these lights right here, it would start to mess with me, and my equilibrium was off. I felt really nauseated, wanted to throw up. Anytime they brought food in front of me, for whatever reason, I would get so emotional. I would start crying. So I wasn't eating. Anytime I would, they'd give me medication to go to sleep. I would wake up in sweats. I was reliving everything. I didn't want to go to sleep because all I was having was bad dreams. So, there were times where I guess I was drugged up enough that I don't remember having any dreams. And so then there was that like constantly wanting like stronger medication. And at one point, once we got moved from Camp Bastion to Camp Leatherneck, where the Wounded Warriors battalion was, one of the Air Force girls had kind of told me like, where's your pain level today? And she said if it was anything below, I think it was like a 7, they would give, or a 5, they would give this medication. So she said, so if your pain is from this to this, you get this medication. So where's your pain? And so a lot of times, like I was telling her it was a 10 when it really wasn't a 10, just so that I could get the strongest medication so that I could like sleep, but not, it would put me out so like where I wasn't dreaming about anything. If that makes sense.
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
So,
and that's taking place over in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Camp Leatherneck. Yeah. And then while I was there at Wounded Warriors, they were, they would do tests on us. They would do physicals on us because we were trying to get back to our unit. We had roughly, so that happened in October. We finally left Afghanistan towards the end of November. So during that time, we were trying to get back to our unit, and I ended up being there for a whole month. And so by the time I was able to go back, it was right as we were getting ready to leave. And so I got to go back and basically kind of pack some of my things that I had left in my room.
right.
But even then, I wasn't able to stay with my unit. They said I was not fit to like actually be in combat. So they literally flew me to Kajaki. I got there, packed some of my personal belongings from my room, which while I was gone, because I'm gone for almost a month, I had gotten all these, like, I was basically the dealer for protein or beef jerky, or I think it was even socks at one point. And so like we would trade out, if I needed something, 9 times out of 10, I could trade protein with any of the Marines because they were always, taking protein drinks. So by the time I got back, all my stuff had already gone. People had gone in there and knew that, hey, Hernandez isn't coming back. Like, it was all gone.
Yeah.
Which was fine. I'm glad that they used it. But at first I was like, what the heck? Where's all my my stash? It's all gone. I had it all organized. No, they ransacked it all. But yeah, so then after I had packed everything, then they took me back to Leatherneck, and then we were just waiting with Wounded Warrior Battalion. It was me and Sergeant Ferris, just waiting for the unit. And then once our unit came back, then within probably about 3 days, then we processed everything, and then that's when we flew back home. So, and then at that point, that's when I started to process to get out. And initially, after we had got back, I was finally able to like pass all the tests that they were requiring to be like, I guess active duty, like qualified. Because for a little while I was kind of put on this like inactive category of, I was unfit for combat. So finally I was able to be good enough, and immediately they wanted to send me right back. And I made the decision. I said, no, I'm done. I felt like the Marine Corps was starting to change. Then the Marine Corps I had remembered it being when I first joined, it was different. And so I'd made the decision, you know what, I want my check back.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Well, you made the decision. You're out of the Marines.
Yes.
Then what happens?
Well, there was a switch that needed to be flipped of, you're in combat and you're getting shot at, and you're having to deal with emotions of some of your brothers passing away, having to see their families, torn apart, and then trying to figure out how to be a normal civilian, even though, they have that saying, once a Marine, always a Marine, I've always had that mindset anyways, even after getting out. You know, I don't put the uniform on anymore, but I still try to serve my community and my friends and family in that same way. But you know, I guess after getting back, just trying to deal with, like I had mentioned before, having dealing with these like almost demonic, just not being able to sleep, being afraid to go out where there's crowds. I avoided going to like Walmart. I'd go late at night when nobody was there, when they're restocking. Um, I constantly felt like I had to look over my shoulder. Um, Walking around, I was constantly looking at the ground, you know, because while we were in Afghanistan, we're constantly observing the ground, making sure that we're not about to step on IED. So there was just that trying to like turn those things off and just trying to live a normal life was difficult. Um, and initially coming back, you know, the doctors wanted to throw medication. That was this is how we're going to cure you. And I didn't want any of that. I didn't want to be dependent on medication for my sleep, for my anxiety, for any of that stuff. So then there was one doctor that had recommended art therapy. And I'd always kind of been artistically inclined. If that always kind of, you know, was interesting to me. My mom was artistic. My grandfather was artistic, so it kind of like ran in the family. And it was never something that I had thought that would be something that would save me during that time, because there was multiple times after coming back and dealing with this constant, just felt like I was being followed, being watched, being tormented by these dark spirits. You know, seeing these things, I felt like I was going crazy. And a lot of times I would resort to drinking helped to kind of numb all that, and, you know, drink to get drunk and pass out, and hopefully not dream about anything. You know, wake up the next morning and start drinking again. That was my one way of coping, but I quickly figured out with art therapy. So how art therapy even came about was, there was one night I got woken up out of a dead sleep, and I could feel this dark presence in my room, in which I had an apartment. It was in Carlsbad, California. I lived by myself, and I could feel this dark energy in my room. It woke me up, and I flipped the lights on, and as soon as I flipped the lights on, what I describe as this like evil, demonic, devil looking dog from the doorway of my bedroom rushed at me and passed through me. And I remember pushing myself up, and I was up against my headboard, freaked out that this had happened, and almost having to pinch myself, like, was that a dream, or did I just really just see that? And that happened, I don't know what time. I think it was somewhere around like 3-4 o'clock at night when that happened. So that next morning, I told myself, I'm gonna really try this art therapy. So I remember going to an Aaron Brothers there that was like just up the road from where I lived, and I walked into the store, and this lady greeted me, and I had some money saved up from deployment, And I told her I've got $500 that I'm willing to just blow on art supplies. Um, I'm a beginner. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you kind of explain some of this stuff to me? I'm not an artist. And so she got me military discount on majority of the paints and the canvases and stuff and brushes, and said, here, take these, get on YouTube, watch some of these videos. You can kind of, and so initially when I started painting, it was just throwing paint on the canvas and trying not to make a mess in my apartment, because I didn't have any couches or anything. It was just the living room was my art studio. And I had all my canvases laid up on one of the walls, and I had some tarps, down on the carpet so I didn't make a mess. And I would just put paint on the canvas and kind of move it around. And then what I thought looked cool, I play music. And that's what I did at night when I could feel this like dark presence. And I would try to switch my mind and try not to think about it. And that was my way of not thinking about it. Instead of just laying in bed on my phone, I felt like I could escape, and that was my escape, was art. And I'm thankful for my art, that God has given me this talent to be able to paint, because there was times that I contemplated suicide. There was a time that I put a pistol in my mouth. I can distinctly remember the taste and the feeling of a cold pistol in my mouth. And so I'm thankful for having art, because with that being said, at night when I couldn't sleep, I would do these paintings, and then I would just put them up against the wall and no one saw them. And then my mom had asked, what's been going on? What are you up to? Because I had planned on living in California. I was going to try to be an artist out in California. And my mom said, send me some of the pictures of your paintings. I want to see them. And I sent them to her, and she's like, man, these are really good. You need to post them on Facebook. Start an art page. And Facebook was still kind of new to me. I really wasn't about that. And so I started posting my paintings to Facebook, and people started seeing them, started reaching out, wanting to buy paintings. And one of my first paintings, it was probably like a 14 by 14 square painting. It was abstract, that I had sold, and I sold it for $50 to one of my high school friend's uncle. He was a lawyer. He wanted a little painting to put in his little office. And so I was super excited that, hey, you know what, maybe I can make some little extra money. That canvas and that paint didn't hardly cost me anything. And so I started posting my work to Facebook, and then next thing I know, I'd get, hey, can you paint this for me? Can you paint that? And so then I was there for a while. That's what I was living off of, is just whatever anybody wanted they wanted painted, I painted it. If I wanted to do it or not, it was just to bring money in. And so that's what I was living off of, just living off of commissions, painting people's dogs or painting people's whatever. And so it was good. I got to meet a lot of people, got to share my story. And I had started to get a good following. And it wasn't until I did this painting that I had to dream about. And it was about that night that we gotten attacked. And because I felt that night that we had angels with us, because I remember carrying some of these Marines to the helo and feeling like almost like I had super strength. That was just, and maybe it was the adrenaline, I don't know. But at that time I was like, man, like there's no way that I could do that. I felt that we had angels with us. And so I did a painting. I titled it "Fear Not," and it depicts a Marine pulling a wounded Marine that's on the ground. So he's sitting in the upright position, and the other Marine is grabbing the back of his plate carrier, and you can see that the Marine's injured. You could see the blood, and the other Marine has his Kevlar flak jacket. He's got his camis on, and he's got his rifle up, and you can see that he's shooting back, and then he's got the angel wings coming around him. And
that's in your studio, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
I was thinking.
Yeah.
Ron and I were there
and
saw that.
Yeah.
That's an incredible.
Yeah. And that's when I really started to take off. I started to get a following, and a lot of them were all military, and so I started selling those prints, and that's when I really knew, like, okay, I could do this full time, because prior to when I first got out, I was thinking I was going to go and become a DPS officer. I was going to follow in the footsteps of my dad, or my grandpa, I call him Dad, and be a police officer. It just seemed like that was the next thing, after coming back from a combat deployment. I was going to be a police officer, but God had a different plan for me, and I'm glad that I invested that $500 initially to get into art, because I feel like if it wasn't for that, like I said, I had contemplated suicide, and that was something that even up until here recently, I had dealt with. it was this constant voice in the back of my head of, life would be a lot easier if you weren't here. Be easier on your family. You wouldn't be this burden. And so up until here recently, I dealt with that constantly. And so, yeah.
Well, I can attest to your quality of art. I've got some of your work hanging in my office.
Yeah, that's right.
You've done some other work.
Yeah.
Around the area. So at what point do you move back to Texas?
So, like I said, it was too expensive to live out there. For my apartment in California, it was like $1,600 a month. Tiny 1-bedroom apartment. I didn't even have a washer and dryer in my apartment. It was too expensive. And I really wasn't making that much off my art then. I hadn't really gotten established, and so I remember telling my family I want to move back, but I don't want to move back to El Dorado. Like I'm not doing that. And so my uncle was living in San Angelo, and he's like, well, you can move back and you can live with me for a little while, until you get on your feet and figure out what you're going to do, and if you're going to go to school or if you're going to go, law enforcement or whatever. And so it moved back. I lived with him probably for about a week, and I was like, I'm going to do my own thing.
We got to love our family, because and you've got a very supportive family,
yes.
obviously.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter how loving and supportive they are. Sometimes it just ain't right.
Yeah.
And we have to do our own thing.
Yeah.
And you've got that strength, and so you continue from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always had that drive to, I'll figure it out, mentality of, I can do it on my own. And that can be also, a bad thing, trying to do it all on your own, thinking you can do it all on your own. So yeah, finally moved back to San Angelo. And the art scene in San Angelo was still a lot of the artists in San Angelo at the time were older. It was an older, majority was women. And, which at the time when I started out, I was getting into some of the art shows, or I was having my own art shows. And so a lot of the older ladies would come around. They're like, oh, you're so cute. And you're like the baby artist here in town. And, and it's like, but as time has gone on, the art scene in San Angelo has grown. I remember downtown San Angelo, I think it was like I was told, like, after the 70s, like, downtown San Angelo, kind of a lot of the buildings were abandoned. They were boarded up. There was not a whole lot going on other than bars.
No, you're right.
And Shannon, and then there are a few churches there downtown, but for the majority of it, it was Shannon, and then the bars.
Yeah.
You know, so it was either you were downtown because you worked at Shannon, or you were at the bars. And so, you know, I started started doing art shows, started, you know, going out telling my story, and I was surprised at how much support I got back from the community of San Angelo and my family, supporting me. I remember driving to places, loading stuff up. I remember my mom helping me. I'd set up at one of the rodeos in Sonora, and you know, it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. I've got to meet a lot of people. And what I love about art is, you know, a lot of times with a certain, whatever kind of work that you do, you're doing the same thing every day, and it can get repetitive, and it gets, you know, boring. But with art, one thing that I love about it is every painting is new.
Right.
And it's a new escape for me to go, you know, whatever it is that I'm painting. And so that's what I really love about it, that it's the same thing, you know, obviously, you know, when with any craft, you got to learn. And I've learned a lot since I started till now. But that's what I really love about it, that it can be something different every time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so I think everybody's got to find what, especially in your situation, could you even speculate what your life would be like if you hadn't turned to art?
Yeah, you know, it'd probably be a lot darker. You know, I probably would have gone and become a police officer, and then, like I said, if it wasn't for my art, you know, suicide was on the table, and it was very, it took a lot to not take that route, and there was times that I don't know what kept me from not pulling the trigger. You know,
well, much like you heard the voice in Afghanistan that it was time to leave.
Yeah,
we don't always hear the voices,
right?
But there's, it's there. The Holy Spirit's there.
Yeah,
and so it's a good thing, because what you're doing with your artwork, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, because you did some amazing stuff here recently. But you actually went hunting with our organization, Headwaters For Heroes, and that was on a little deal we were doing it at the G2 Ranch, and that was the only ranch we were doing this on, where Purple Heart veteran that went, we let him pick the next year's recipient, and you got selected by
Juan
Rubio.
Yeah,
Juan Rubio's a great person. I love Juan. They're in their new house there, closer to the water, where he can fish more.
Yeah,
I think the world of Juan. But so you got to come, to the G2 and hunt, and you know the G2 is quite a phenomenal place. It's incredible. It's a 5-star resort. You know, but you got there. Who was your guide?
I'm trying to remember. I'm not good with the names. I do remember his face. I don't think he's there anymore. From the last time I went, because I picked Segura to go,
right,
and he wasn't there. I think he had
that was probably Anthony then. He was the manager at the time.
No. He was an older gentleman. I believe he was in his. I say older. He was. I believe he was in his 50s. But his name slipped in my mind.
Well, I don't remember. I've been there so many times, and I know so many of the guides.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who hunts with who, and I'd have to go back through to figure it out. But Tell us a little bit about that experience at G2.
Yeah, so just the fact that Juan had selected me was special to me, because Juan had always kind of been a big brother as far as like in the Purple Heart community. He was the first one that said, hey, why don't you join our Purple Heart chapter, and kind of he was kind of my therapist in a way without him realizing. And I think I was the same for him, you know, when we were dealing with things. I'd go over to his house and share a beer with him, and we'd talk about things that we were dealing with. And so we got close, especially through fishing. We got really close. But it was special to me, the fact that he had chosen me, because I know he knows other Purple Heart veterans, and that he chose me, it really meant a lot. And so we get out to the G2, walk into the main building where they have all the mounts, and just, I mean, like you said, it's a 5-star resort. I mean, at the time they were talking about adding on and even making it better than what it was. I hadn't been out there since they did a lot of the remodeling, but I got to see some videos that they, I think, put a driving course up on top of one of the.
Yeah, they got the Top Golf up there.
Yeah.
They finished out more suites. The lake is finished. Got it stocked.
Yeah.
And, they've got their skeet range finished. It's just there's no reason you can't find something to do
right
out there. So
yeah.
The little putting courses are done, and it's, like I said, it's a nice. They've got it set up really nice.
Yeah, and everyone there, if they were either a part of G2 or Headwaters for Heroes, and that's one thing with Headwaters for Heroes, is that everyone in the organization has always been, it made me feel, and I know the other veterans, I speak on their behalf, that y'all make us feel like we're family. And I don't say that to sound cliche of, that I really do feel that y'all care. Because out of all the other organizations I've ever gotten to go hunt with, y'all actually reach out. We actually, you call me and we meet up and get to have lunch together, and just hang out. Be friends.
I'm not. Every organization runs things the way they want to, but
yeah.
We believe we're called to do this.
Yeah.
And so we have the right spirit amongst us, and we're family.
Yeah.
We introduced a new Gold Star family a couple of weeks ago, and it was like I told them, the young lady, the child who's going to be hunting with us, she was very formal when we were parting from the range day, and she reached out to shake hands, and I said, no, you're family now. And that's the way we truly feel.
Yeah.
We're here to answer our phones when we get those calls from soldiers, veterans that are in dark places, and we're family. We try to take care of each other.
Yeah.
We don't believe in dog and pony shows.
Yeah.
We just want to give you just a family experience.
Yeah.
It's what I like to call is the good old boy deer camp experience, where nobody's judged. We do what we do. We have fun. We have fellowship.
Yeah.
Maybe we drink too much sometimes. But we truly do care.
Yeah. And it's definitely felt, and it doesn't feel fake. It's a genuine feeling, and that's what I've gravitated to, and that's why I've wanted to, I told you from the get-go, hey, every time y'all have y'all's fundraiser, I want to help, to give back.
And we're going to talk about that because that's a pretty cool story too, the fundraiser and what went on there.
Yeah.
But let's finish up on G2.
Yeah.
You shot a pretty nice buck out there.
I was surprised that they let me take that buck, because there was some really nice bucks out there, but I was really looking for just a beautiful symmetrical 10-pointer, and I remember when we went out there with my guide, he said, you know, take a look, see what you know, if there's one that you like. And I remember that the deer coming out to eat, and I told him that one over there to the left. And initially he was confused. He thought there was a different one there. And he's like, no, you got to pick a better one than that. I was like, no, the one at the very top left there. He's like, and finally we were on the same deer, and he's like, hold on, let me make a call real quick. And I was like, no, they're going to say no. And then sure enough, he got off the phone with whoever he called. I don't know if he called Don or who.
He called Don.
And then he said, you got a green light. And so, of course, like, you know, my adrenaline started pumping because I'm like, and, you know, got excited. And then he said, you know, get ready, get in position. And I remember taking the shot, and everything happened so quickly. You know, it was a different feeling than I remember the feeling that I, you know, being in combat, having to, you know, shoot at another person. It was I don't know how to explain it, but it was different. And I remember we sat up in the blind for a little while, and I was ready to get out of the blind and go wrap my hands around the horns, and he said, no, we need to stay up here for a little bit. And it seemed like it was an eternity sitting up there having to wait. You know, I'm like, kept looking at my watch. I'm like, you know, I'm pretty sure it's dead. You know, he's like, no, you know, and we kind of visited a little bit, and then finally he said, all right, let's go find your buck. And then we went down there, and I almost got two bucks, because when we went down, there was another buck laying up underneath this tree, and he thought that's the one I had shot. He said, you just must have just wounded it. Go ahead and shoot him again. And right before I'm about to shoot this buck, because I couldn't see its horns because it was laying up underneath some brush. And right before I'm about to pull the trigger, it gets up and runs. And I'm like, no, that's not my buck. He said, no, are you sure? And so we kept walking around, and sure enough, my buck had run behind some thicket, and it was laying up. It was already down. And so he's like, well, good thing you didn't take that shot. You were about to bag 2 bucks, you know.
Don would not have appreciated that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I almost got.
Don's a generous man, but there are limits.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a little confusion there, but I remember later that night, after, like, you know, hanging out and everything, laying down in bed, I must have been smiling the whole time because my cheeks were sore.
Yeah.
I remember laying there in bed. I'm like, you know, I must have been smiling the whole time. But yeah.
As I remember it, you were.
Yeah, it was a good hunt. You know, I was excited, you know, to get, because my wife had just recently bought me a dehydrator to make jerky, and so I was excited to make jerky, you know, and then obviously to get them out and show it off and tell everybody about it, but also just the getting to fellowship with everyone there, you know, is a big part of it. You know, a lot of the guys are curious, you know, a lot of them that worked there at G2 had never served, and so they were, you know, wanting to get to know me and, you know, asking questions, and just everyone just being so genuine, giving me their numbers, to, hey, if you ever need anything, give me a call, or giving me their business cards. You know, it was a great hunt, just getting to hang out with those guys, and I'm still friends with some of them.
Right.
And so we're actually scheduled to go. We're planning a hog hunt with. His name is slipping my mind right now. He was Segura's guide when he got to go, and so we're planning on a hog hunt. He's got a hunter that has some land, and I believe he's a veteran, and he wants to get a group of guys out, and we do a hog hunt.
I don't remember who was his. So I can't remember all. I know Sergio has been guides.
I think it might have been Sergio.
Sergio's a great guy.
Yeah.
Mark Barth has guided a lot. A lot of those guys, I mean, they look forward to it. They almost argue over who's going to get to guide when we come there because it's a great experience for them.
Yeah.
So you got this great buck, and so the next year, a couple things happened. You got to pick somebody to come back the next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And lo and behold, who was that?
George Segura.
I love that guy.
Yeah, he's like a brother to me. And so I knew who I wanted as soon as, whenever they had told me about the whole, like, Juan had picked me, I'll get to pick somebody. And I knew he was on my mind immediately. He's the first one that popped in my head. And he was super excited to get to go, because I was telling him about, the G2 and, because he had gone on I believe he had got to go on a veteran hunt. And it was on a low fence, just kind of, but I was telling him about the quality of deer out at the G2, and he got a really nice buck.
He got him a nice buck as well.
Because I'm pretty sure they had to make a phone call, and they initially, I think, said no, but he was persistent on that's the one he wanted, and I think Sergio had to call back a second time. He said no, that's the one he wants, and I think Sergio even had to take a photo of the deer and send it back, and they finally said, go ahead. Yeah, gave him the green light. And that was an exciting trip, because we were all
because his was a non-typical.
Yes.
And I think they wanted him to shoot something more typical.
Yeah.
And that's if I remember the way it went.
Yeah.
But going back, Don's such a giving individual. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, because Juan actually got to hunt and get a deer when he came out with me.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because I don't know what, I think there was something that had, I think maybe Don had lost a deal or something, and so he told Juan, I'm gonna make right by it. So
he didn't get the deer that they wanted for him.
Oh, okay.
Is what it was, and Don said, we're gonna have you back. Because that's not the deer we wanted for you.
Yeah.
But it was a situation where we were getting late, and the decision was made to pull the trigger, and Don said, no, that's not the deer I wanted for you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so he said, we're going to have you back. So I remember that now.
Yeah.
So not only did you bring Jorge or George back, you did something else pretty phenomenal. You painted quite.
Oh, I forgot about that.
How do you forget a 4-foot by 8-foot canvas?
Yeah, I forgot about it. It barely fit in the back of my truck. I remember that. Yeah, I forgot about that.
You painted this brilliant, and it still hangs in the lodge over the fireplace at the G2 Ranch.
Yeah. It's Willie and Waylon.
Willie and Waylon. There was 2 of their main breeder bucks, and you put them in a fight.
Yeah. Yeah.
and you gave that to Don and Sandy at the G2 for your appreciation, and they were touched.
Yeah.
They were touched. It meant a lot to them. And like I said, it's still hanging over the fireplace. Really? And that was an incredible.
That was fun to paint. 'Cause it was kind of a last minute thing. 'Cause I don't even know. I think I might have had mentioned to you, like, hey, I want to.
Yeah, because I took some pictures and sent to you. Yeah. I was down there on another hunt, and I took some pictures of Willie and Waylon on those stands.
Yeah.
They used to have them in there in the lodge. And I remember sending you pictures, and you were talking about doing something.
Yeah.
And I remember it wasn't much before the hunt where Jorge was going, where you really didn't have anything.
Yeah, I was like, and then it came to me. I'm like, why don't I do them, getting into it? Like because I think initially I was going to do them just like how they are, the photos you had sent of them being like on a mount. And then after doing, brainstorming, I was like, well, why don't I just make them fighting? And it ended up being a really cool piece, because the background was very, like, a lot of the deer there, the horns are just kind of going all, and so the background is kind of abstract, but in a way is kind of like in the same kind of emulates the horns in a sense. And then that was a fun piece. I completely I don't know how I forgot about that.
But it goes back to, you know, the way a lot of your art is kind of done. Things just come to you.
Yes.
And I've been following your artwork for a while now. Like I said, I have a piece of your work hanging in my office.
Yeah, the Buck and Bronc.
Yeah, and I sit in my office and I look at it every day.
Yeah, every
day. And I really like the rodeo stuff, and I've got a lot of other rodeo art in my office. You know, more pencil drawings and stuff. So I mean, I've got another artist that I follow on that, and he does a remarkable job. But yours, there's not a set pattern to what you do.
Right.
You do a lot of different things with your art, and I think a lot of people think about artists, they kind of pigeonhole themselves, that this is what I do.
Yeah, they only stick to one style or one subject.
And I don't see that in you. I mean, from the doing Willie and Waylon in a fight, the angel wings around the shoulder, to you're doing Disney characters the other day.
Yeah.
You know, it's and there's another one coming that is spectacular. You know, the diversity is so impressive. And I guess what's more impressive is it comes to you.
Yeah.
And that is just incredible. So, you know, you mentioned our fundraisers, which we have an auction every year. This next year's in 2025 will be May 3rd. Mark your calendars, people. Be there. It's a great auction.
Yeah.
You were at one of the auctions. You actually had some of your art in our auction.
The first one was the eagle, wasn't it?
Yeah, the eagle. I think that's the auction where Mr. Barrett bought that gun.
That's right.
And a lot of what happens in our auction, people, we auction off guns, hunts, you name it, we do it. And we have like Mr. Barrett, Mr. Jeff Barrett out of Gale, Texas, Snyder, Texas, somewhere in that area. Mr. Jerry Copeland, Vic Hollander, Dwayne Burrows, rest in peace. You know, it was not unusual for them to buy guns, and then they'd say, okay, all the veterans here, step up and give everybody a ticket, and you have a quick raffle drawing.
Yeah.
Well, that year you won a gun, and you won that gun, and then one of our pro staff, Justin Garcia, ended up buying a scope in that auction.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And he gave you that scope, and then what happens?
Yeah, well, then y'all invited me out on
a pronghorn hunt
to out at Mr. Baird's.
At Mr. Baird's place, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the painting he actually purchased was it was a buck, was the one that he had bought.
That's right.
That was the second painting.
That's the second. That was the second. Okay.
Yeah, it was a smaller piece. I think 8x10 or 11x14. It wasn't that big.
I want to say that Vic Hollander bought the eagle.
Yeah, that was the first one, and then it was the buck. Because the third one was, I believe, Doc Holliday.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one we auctioned off this last year.
Yes.
And it brought good money.
Yeah. Yeah. So the rifle I had gotten was a 6.5 Creedmoor custom rifle, and then got it decked out with that scope, and then got invited out to Mr. Barrett's property out near Big Springs, and then got to get the pronghorn with that rifle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a fun hunt. That was there was a point in time where we were on our last day, and I thought I wasn't going to get anything, because they were, we weren't in a high fence. We were having to stalk them. We were kind of having to figure out where they were, and then sometimes where they were, we couldn't shoot because we'd be shooting over into another property, or they were in another property. So we were having to wait for them to move into where we could actually hunt them. So that was a whole other kind of frustration to begin with. But I remember the first day, I remember telling Paco, because I forget what he was saying. I was like, you need to stop being so negative. I was like, you know, you need to start speaking that you know, good things are going to happen.
Right.
You know, don't speak negatively. And then, and sure enough, he's like, my hunter, he's going to get the first pronghorn. He's going to get a nice one. And sure enough, he got a nice one. But I got lucky with mine too. 'Cause
Justin Garcia was your.
yes.
And that's the other cool part about it. He bought that scope and gave to you. Mr. Barrett bought that gun and gave to you, and now you're on Mr. Barrett's place, and all these people are together. It was meant to be.
Yeah, it totally was. And so, like, getting to be there, getting to fellowship with all those guys was awesome. Justin was an awesome guide, and he was persistent on, no, we're going to get you, you know, we're going to get you a nice pronghorn. Because we kind of had to team up on, he had to, because they kept getting away from us. And so at one point he had to set me up, and he got in the golf cart to move around because they were watching that golf cart. Mm-hmm. And so he kind of distracted them so that they would start to move back towards me. And, cause otherwise they kept getting away from us. They kept, and then it was almost like they disappeared. Because that pronghorn buck was staying with some other doe, and it was weird how all of a sudden we'd lose sight of him and didn't know where they were. So we kept driving around looking, you know, trying to spot and stalk. So it wasn't easy, you know, getting that pronghorn, but it was worth it for sure.
How many yards was that shot?
It really wasn't that far. It might have been around 100 yards or less. I had been practicing for a little bit further of a shot.
Right, because typically on those pronghorns, we're shooting 400 yards to get them.
But I had stalked up pretty close to him because I was hiding behind brush, moving around, trying to, you know, get as close as I could, because pretty much every time I tried to get him in the scope, he'd move. And I wanted to make sure I got a good shot. And luckily, when I took the shot, he was getting ready to go over into another property. So, you know, I got lucky. And then right after I shot that pronghorn, game warden shows up. And Justin looks over and he's like, you got your hunting license with you, right? Yeah, we're good. But he just wanted to come over and see what we had gotten. And, you know.
Well, folks, that pronghorn went gold and fourth in the world that year in Trophy Game Records of the World. That was a cool night when you got to come receive your award.
Yes.
And you know, that's what we enjoy seeing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really cool that you were there. And
yeah, I got a nice plaque, and later I got a belt buckle.
Yeah.
Which initially I think it was just first and second place, and then later y'all contacted me and said, hey, just to verify your address, but we've got a belt buckle for you. And I was so excited because I wear that thing all the time. It's a beautiful, whoever y'all have making that, or I guess
the rewards people make them.
Yeah. You know? It's a nice, I always get compliments on it, you know? So, and then, which I tell them about the hunt and tell them about y'all. So it gives me an opportunity to share, you know, about it. So.
And I mean, we do have some good times, and we really enjoy taking you guys out and doing stuff. But we're going to move on past the hunting. I mean, that's, you know, quick little plug for Headwaters for Heroes. That's what we do, ladies and gentlemen. We take our Purple Heart veterans and our Gold Star kids hunting and fishing. We need your help. We got a lot to discuss. So tell me something that I saw recently, and it was this morning. I really paid attention to it. You've been back. You've talked a lot about your demons, and you've mentioned that you knew you had a guardian angel, but your spiritual life has really changed.
Yes, dramatically.
It has grown
Mm-hmm.
by leaps and bounds. And the church that you attend, and you're more than happy to, you can plug it. I'm great with that. But they recently had you do something pretty special.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we started going, my wife and I started going to Celebration Church there in San Angelo. And, you know, we had been invited to go to that church for almost 3 years and just kept kind of putting it off. You know, I'd gone to so many other churches and just, I was always getting, I wasn't getting anything out of it, or the message was really dry and it just didn't apply to me. And so I always left other churches kind of still lost, still wondering. And, you know, I've always believed in God and in Jesus, but had never, the way that Pastor Brandon and both his sons, Pastor Weston and Pastor Keenan, the way that they can just bring scripture to life, it's phenomenal. They definitely have an anointing of being able to preach the word in such a way that it comes to life. And every time I go to church, I walk away with something. And so we've been going on 6 months. We finally said yes to my sister, and we started going. And from the first day, it seemed like what he was preaching. At one point, I thought to myself, has my pastor been following me around? How does he's preaching this, and it's like it's directed right to me.
Yeah.
And the series that he was preaching in was called Cage Free. And during that time, there was definitely, for me, a point of being able to get out of this cage that I had been in, that I had put myself in, for a long time after, you know, coming back from the Marine Corps, and finally realizing that I didn't have to be in that cage anymore. And so fast forward a few months, my wife gets on the worship team. She auditioned, and she got accepted on the worship team. And then I guess within the church community, they started looking at each other, you know, the different people with the worship team, you know, friend requesting each other. And so they saw, they must have gone on my wife's page, and I think she had shared some of my artwork. And so the worship leader had reached out to her and said, "Hey, your husband's an artist?" And she said, "Yes. You know, you need to check out his work." And he's like, "Well, I already been looking at his stuff." And apparently somebody had shared, what's funny about it is that it was the Headwaters For Heroes post that you had done of the tombstone of Doc Holliday.
Yeah.
He saw that, and he said it was a blue one. It was a blue, because he for whatever reason it slipped his mind, and I was like, a blue painting? And I was trying to think about it, and I started looking back through my photos. I was like, was it a Doc Holliday? He's like, that's what it was. He was like, it was the Doc Holliday painting. And I was like, yeah, that. And then he had mentioned, yeah, we saw that it was like going to be part of a fundraiser. And so he said that was the painting. He's like, because he's like, I love Tombstone. And so he said, is there something, do you think you could come to the church and paint during one of our worship nights? And, you know, I had painted before at one of the bars downtown. When I first got back, I started doing speed paintings. And so I would go up to the bar and paint for an hour or 2 hours, and then we'd auction off the painting. And then I would decorate the bar with my artwork. And so a lot of times with that, it was painting, and then when I was done painting, I normally had a line of beers from people that were watching me paint. They normally would come up, "Hey, what kind of beer do you want?" And at the time I was drinking Dos Equis. And so I always left the bar intoxicated. And so it wasn't a great, you know, painting at the bar and drinking, you know, it was fun, But now looking back, I'm glad I'm past that.
Right.
And now I'm painting at my church. And it was a great experience because once he said, "Are you interested in painting? Pastor Brandon is excited, wants you to paint it." And so I was like, "Oh, I can't say no,"
Right.
And they've got a lot of people going to that church where they have 3 services. And so, and the church is large. And so they said, "We're going to have this one night where we're going to do, all we're going to do is worship. We're going to be playing live music. We've got a band, and you're going to just paint on stage." And so I said, "Well, what do y'all want me to paint?" I assumed that they had talked about, "Hey, let's get him to paint this." And for once, they were like, "We're going to leave it up to you." Because most of the time with any commission, somebody commissions me in the past, they already had something in their mind. And they said, "We want you to pray about it. And however the Holy Spirit speaks to you, we want you to go with that." And I'm like, okay, even that much more pressure,
Yeah.
But for the first time, there really wasn't a whole lot of like anxiety or stress working up to the point where I was going to paint on stage. When in the past, when I used to paint at the bar, I used to get super nervous. My hands would get really sweaty. I was just, afraid of and I didn't have a whole lot of people watching me. A lot of times it was my family or some people that just happened to be in the bar. And over time there started to be a bigger crowd once they knew I was there. I was there every, I think it was every 3rd Thursday of the month. And so anyways, back to the church, the week prior to I knew I was going to paint, we have YA. It's young adults, where it's people from the age roughly 18 till really there's no age limit. But most of them tend to be college age, into the early 20s. And so I remember that night as I'm listening to the message and just praying about what am I going to paint? I'm like, "God, please, give me something." And so that night I remember going home and praying about it, and took because I take sleeping meds. It's the only meds I take. It's to shut my brain off, because otherwise I'll lay there and I'm thinking about, what
am I going to paint next?
Yeah. And so, I fall asleep. And in our room, I've got a clock that shines the time up on the ceiling. And, so at night when I'm tossing and turning, or I wake up, I can look up and see what time it is. And that night I woke up out of a dead sleep, and I don't remember dreaming anything prior to that, but I got woken up, and I remember looking up, and the time was 3:40 up on the ceiling. And I heard the sound of God, his voice, like you can hear my voice right now. And he said, "This is what I want you to paint." And so I closed my eyes, and I saw Jesus pulling a person out of it, and it was really dark. But that's what I saw when I closed my eyes. And then I heard him say, and so in my mind I'm thinking, "Oh, that's like, when Jesus pulled Peter out of the water."
Right.
And so he said, "You know why I changed Simon's name to Peter?" And so I said, "Yes. My understanding is that, that he would be the rock that the church would be built on in the future. He'd be the foundation." And Peter, the translation for Peter is Petros, which means rock. He said, "Yes, but it was also a reminder to him that without me, he would sink like a rock." When you toss a rock into the water, does it sink or does it float?
Absolutely.
And so it was one of those moments that I could feel myself sinking into the bed, because it was just like one of these aha moments of okay, did God just shared. And what was funny about it, it was almost like he was saying it as like, I couldn't see his face, but almost like he was kind of like had a smirk on his face. Like, hey, you know why this, like, yeah. And so once I woke up, and then he revealed to me, because everything was dark initially when I saw Jesus pulling this person out of the water, and them, him grabbing him, and then he revealed to me that this person was me, and that the water that he was pulling me out of was the sin that I had been living in prior, that I had gotten so content of just treading water. I was in the water, everything was cool, but it wasn't until that I felt like the devil had started to put these weights on my shoulders that I started to sink. And here recently, I rededicated my life to God, because I was living in sin. I was content, and because I was living for the world. I wasn't living for God. And so I took it as, okay, that's what I need to paint. I need to paint where Jesus is grabbing my arm and pulling me out of the water. And I wanted to do it in a way to where it was his hand grabbing me, not I'm grabbing him. Because there's some depictions where both hands are clasped together. I wanted it to be like, no, it wasn't by my doing. It was God pulling me out of the water. And
you certainly achieved that.
Yeah,
what I've seen in the painting so far.
Yeah, I had good hand models. So at that point, I had thought about using my own hand, but I wanted to make sure that I got a good photo reference. And so, I prayed about it, and then I heard, why don't you use Pastor Brandon's hand as the hand? And initially, it was going to be him pulling my hand up. And then I got to the church, and his son walked in, and I was like, why don't you get over here and you be the hand that's reaching up. So I positioned him how I saw it in that night in my head, and we did some different positions, and I told Pastor Brandon from the start, like, I want you to grab him like you would be pulling your son out of the water. And so that was the one and we went with, and I told his son, don't grab onto his wrist, kind of have your hand open. And so that was the image that we went with. And it's so special now because now that painting's in the church.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's Pastor Brandon's hand and Pastor Weston, his son, for that piece. But I felt like that painting was done in such a way that the hand reaching up could be a male or female.
Yeah. It can be anybody.
Yeah.
So what was it like? I mean, you're sitting up there in front of the congregation,
yes,
while worship is going on, and you're painting.
So, like, prior to that, we went into there's this prayer room off to the side of the stage, and I could feel a little bit of, like, I was excited to do it. I hadn't painted in front of a lot of people in a while. And anytime I'd ever painted in front of, like, at the bar and stuff, I'd never practiced before I did it. I just knew what I wanted to paint, and I painted it. And however it came out is how it came out. And so prior to this, I had people asking me, like, are you going to do, like, a little mini one? So then you make sure you're doing the right colors. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm not. I'm going to paint this by faith alone, and then the Holy Spirit's going to help me with this painting. And so I prayed about it. We prayed about it in the prayer room before we went out. And I knelt before the canvas, and I said a prayer, like, God, I want this image that you showed me in my head. I want to be able to convey that, and I want for people to be able to relate to it and see themselves in this piece, so that they will remember those times that you pulled them out of those dark waters, that you helped them when they were dealing with anxiety, depression. You have it. And so it was powerful. It was everyone's worshiping. I could feel their energy on my back and just surrounding me. It was a really neat experience, that one that I had not ever experienced painting at a bar. Being in this room with all these believers worshiping, on fire for God, it like definitely, it was definitely felt. And to the point after I couldn't turn around and look at the congregation because I could feel myself getting emotional. And so I tried to just keep my blinders on and just, let's finish this painting. And then when I'm done, then I can, because after I was done painting, they had me address the church and kind of give them like a 5-minute little tidbit of what I've given you here today. You know, my time in service and my art, and then what was the inspiration for the painting.
So I got to ask the question.
Yeah.
Where are the demons?
So there was a time where these demons were constantly following me around and just tormenting me, and sometimes they'd leave me alone for a little while, and I think, oh, okay, I'm good. And a lot of times I noticed it when I drank. There was a point there in my life not too long ago, about 5 months ago, that I was probably drinking about 15 beers a day. And I think there's a reason why they call it spirits, you know, with alcohol.
Yeah.
Every time I drank, if I really thought about it, it was making me a different person, if I liked it or not. And I know my wife could see it, and it wasn't that I was like, you know, abusing my wife, or I was, you know, ugly to my kids or anything. It was just, I think she could see that I was becoming a different person. And especially there was times before where I would, you know, be out drinking and somebody would piss me off, and it was like a switch. I would turn into this angry, evil person that wasn't me, you know. And so here recently, once, you know, we started going to church at Celebration, and everything that Pastor Brandon and Pastor Weston and Pastor Keenan were preaching about, it was resonating in me, and I felt conviction about it. And you know, I decided to get baptized, and it was after being baptized, I had made the decision, like, I'm, you know, like once I'm baptized, I need to start living this life that God is calling me to live. And once I fully surrendered, it was one night at YA, I remember putting my hands up, and that night, Pastor Keenan he's an awesome pastor, and he'd preached, and I don't remember exactly what he preached, but everything he preached about was things that I was dealing with alcohol, with cussing, just, you know, sins in general. So I decided, you know what, I need to start being the husband that God's called me to be. I need to sacrifice these things that I'm holding on to, that are ultimately holding me back, like alcohol. I had even started doing some drugs. And there was a point where it very quickly could have gone in a totally different direction.
Right.
And so my wife and I, we started going to a marriage counseling, and like fully devoting ourselves to the church. We started reading our Bible together, and just starting to be the husband and wife to each other, like it calls for us to be in the Bible. And so that's what we started doing. And from that moment, these demons that were constantly tormenting me or waking me up from cold sweats at night, and they were all at bay. And so since then, I haven't that feeling or that presence that I used to feel, that literally be on my shoulders, I don't feel anymore. The urge to want to drink has totally left me, and that was something that I thought I was gonna deal with up until the day I died as an old man. I thought, and so when God delivered me from that, I knew that it was for real, you know, because I had been living my life as a lukewarm Christian. And so it was, you know, God finally said, are you going to be, instead of being this lukewarm, you know, are you going to be on fire for me, or are you just going to be cold? Like, you need to pick what side of the fence you want to be on. And that's pretty much, you know, the moment that I decided, you know, I am going to fully devote myself to God. That's when things started to change.
Well, you know, and you know, I've talked about this in the past. Many of our veterans are struggling with their faith. Mm-hmm. And as a result, there's a lot of the same things. There's the dark times. Mm-hmm. There's the alcohol. There's the drugs. There's putting the pistol in your mouth.
Yeah.
What can you say to your brothers out there that are struggling? What bit of advice?
You know, if you had talked to me about 6 months ago, I would have told you something completely different. I would, you know, this world will tell you, do what you love, you know, do what makes you feel happy. And that's not the case. You know, since I've started to sacrifice things like, you know, my desire for alcohol or my fleshly desires, that's when I really noticed change, in a way that's supernatural, that can only come from God. Mm-hmm. And so that would be my biggest thing, is that that they need to decide, you know, what God had asked me, you know, you need to pick your side. Do you want to live for the devil? Or do you want to live for me? And ultimately that's a decision they need to make. And that's the reason why God gives us free will. You know, he doesn't want, he wants you to want him. And at that point of you actually wanting him, that's when he will pull you out of those dark places. That's what he did for me.
Pull you out of the water.
Yes. And that's why that painting means so much to me, because, you know, I was living in all these sins. Pretty much any sin they list not to do in the Bible, I was doing it.
Yeah.
And the thing is it was a way I was doing it, and I was justifying it for myself in a way that was like, I'm not hurting anybody. No one's getting hurt over here. I'm doing my own thing. But it was, at the end of the day, all these things that the devil's good at tricking. He's good at counterfeit. He'll make you think that this beautiful thing over here is a beautiful thing, and then next thing you know, because what the way that it was described to me is that the devil won't bring you a link of chains, that addiction or whatever it is, and tell you, here, lock yourself up. He'll bring you a link.
Yeah.
And you and that link is a choice, and you make your choices in life of what you want to do, what you don't want to do. And so I'm no longer taking these links from him,
right?
And building, because I had started to build my own chains, and that's why, with me wanting to devote my painting, my time to God, is so important to me, because too often we're you know, he's given us these little links, and we don't realize that we're building this chain. So that's how I've dealt with it. And I really just truly giving it to God is how it's been done. Because in the past, I've tried to give up drinking my own self, you know, under my own power, trying to, you know, how people try to diet.
Right.
You know, I tried to, I'll try to cut back a little bit, and then I was right back at it.
Yeah.
And it was that moment of when I finally got on my knees, put my hands up, and I said, God, I'm giving this to you. I don't want it anymore. Take this from me. And it was when I fully was willing to sacrifice that. That's when I felt him take it from me.
Right.
And that's when that desire has left. Because my prayer was for when alcohol touched my lips, that it would be sour and not taste good. And that's what happened the next time I went to go take a drink. The alcohol didn't taste right. It tasted off, and I made sure by a second beer, I tried to drink it and it tasted nasty. And I poured both of those out, and since then I'm going on 5 months sober from any drugs or alcohol.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that is where a lot of our veterans, they get tied up. They feel like it's the way to fight their demons. Mm-hmm. And as we get closer to wrapping this up, we've heard an incredible range of things from you today. And what I hope that the people walk away with today is a better understanding, and I think they will, of how hard war is.
Yeah.
On our people.
Yes.
And, you know, I don't think that the conflicts, the wars you were in, you didn't come back to a very negative population like the Vietnam veterans did, but people do look differently upon you, almost as damaged goods. And I think this really eats at people. It's like, you know, I don't think anybody ever expects to come home to a hero's welcome like World War II. Right. You know, the ticker tape parades in New York and all of the great celebrations. I don't think anybody expects that. But a little more compassion and understanding, which is something that we lack in this society. And that's a whole nother conversation of how God does need to be involved in that. Right. But we have to let it. And I think that's the message I'm hearing you say today to your brothers, that you have to let God pull you, but you got to reach too.
Yeah, you've got to reach out and be willing to take that, and realize that no matter what, God loves you. For the longest time, I thought all these bad things were happening to me, and it was God that was doing it to me. It wasn't God. From the beginning of time, this world has been corrupt since Adam and Eve, right? And that the devil caused them to sin. You know, we're born into sin, and people don't realize that from the get-go, that's how it was. But it wasn't God that did it, and it's not God sending people to hell either. And that's why that free will comes into play.
That's right. We're making that choice.
You're making that choice, because when you go to hell, and the thing is, what a lot of people don't understand either is that our time here on earth is that we should follow the ways of when Jesus said, "Follow me." He was the example, and he makes it clear in the Bible what we should do and how we should follow. And a lot of times people don't do that. And so how do you expect to go to heaven if here on earth you're not trying to spend time with God and you're not trying to have a relationship with God? Yeah. That's what's going to happen when that day comes and you're no longer here and your ticket gets punched. That's when God will say, "Depart from me, I never knew you." Right. And that's what I don't want to hear from him.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
And so we've got to understand that, because that's what hell is. It's a separation from God. Yeah. And so that's why it's so important, because I think a lot of people get tied up in religion, and that it's not about religion. It's about having a relationship with God. Yeah. And following Jesus and looking at, you know, you see these bracelets, you know, what would Jesus do? It really is, you know, how would I handle this now that I have the Holy Spirit living in me? How should I handle this situation? How should I address people? How should I show love like Jesus showed love? And ever since then, having that mindset switch, a renewing of my mind, that's when things started to change because it's not about living of this world. It's about living for God and having that mind change. That's when things start to really, you'll see change in yourself. And when you actually allow God into your heart, you'll be surprised when you say, God, give me that Holy Spirit and allow it to change me from the inside out. And that's when I started to notice change in myself. Because God's a gentleman. He'll knock at your door, but unless you open it, he's not going to come in.
Right.
You have to be willing to open that door and let him in. That's when things will change.
And that's where I see a lot of our veterans that they've got to find a way to open that door.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to open that door, and they'll find new things. And
yeah.
And like I said, we're running out of time here.
Yeah.
Tell us about your art gallery. What is it? Where's it at?
Well, so actually right now we're in the process of selling the art gallery.
Okay.
Economies, art's not selling like, we'd hoped for. But the art gallery was the Blue Buffalo Art Gallery. It was downtown San Angelo on South Chadburn. But we are in the process of we've got it listed right now. Actively right now, I don't have any of my artwork in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do people get a hold of you if they want?
So if they wanted to follow me on Facebook, I don't have any other social media. I used to have Instagram. That was something that I felt I needed to get rid of for obvious reasons. And so I just have my Facebook page, either my personal page or my art page. If you search Warrior Art by Nestor Hernandez, that's where I post on there. And I tend to post my stuff on my personal page, and then I post it to my Warrior Art. So that's where they can follow me.
Yeah, the economy's tough, folks. We all know that.
Yeah.
We do have an election coming up, and we need to be in the right place there, and God's a big part of that. I'm a firm believer in that.
Absolutely.
So, Nestor, it's been an incredible sessions.
Time went by quick.
We've heard a lot of things. I appreciate you coming out and sharing your story,
sir.
Not just for the public, but for your brothers that are struggling out there.
Yeah.
And we pray for every one of them out there. And by God, if one person hears you and moves the right direction,
yes, sir,
then we've had a success today.
Absolutely.
And I truly believe there's going to be more that will listen and make the right move. But that means all of us, we got to keep moving and doing our part. And ladies and gentlemen, Headwaters for Heroes cannot survive or do what we do to help our veterans and Gold Star families without you. So we really need everybody. Check out our Facebook page, Headwaters for Heroes. Check out our website, headwatersforheroes.com. There's a donation button. You can click and donate either way. If you're any of the big ranches out there that want to donate, we've got lots of people want to hunt, and it's so rewarding to see the joy on these men's and women faces when they're able to get out and be a part of God's creation and harvest an animal and put food on the table. It's very rewarding for them and meaningful for them. So we encourage every one of y'all, check out our website, check out our Facebook page. Please donate. Once again, I want to thank G2 Ranch, Don and Sandy Gilchrist, for all of their generosity and all they've done for Headwaters for Heroes. I tell you what, if you're the type of person that wants to support a company or a business that supports our veterans, the G2 Ranch is definitely one of those places. Just get out there and see that huge American flag they fly 24 hours a day. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Nestor, once again. It's been inspirational talking to you, and I look forward to more time with you, brother.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I thank you for allowing me to share my story, and I tell this to everyone that always tells me, hey, thank you for your service, but also thank you all for everyone that supports this organization, and thank you for being Americans worth fighting for.
That means a lot to me.
Yes, sir.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next time. God bless.